Patrick Carpentier does have plenty of reason to smile. However, it's not fun and games because you put a driver's helmet on him and the 20-year-old rookie is all business, hoping to become Canada's next racing superstar. In round one of the 1992 Players Limited Atlantic Series, he scored an impressive third-place finish. What a debut! In Toronto, Carpentier weathered traffic to once again finish third. And then Vancouver in round four, Carpentier passed Chris Smith to come up with his first win ever in Atlantic Limited Racing. Today, Patrick Carpentier puts the cap on a great 1992 as he is all set to take the Players Limited Atlantic Championship. And it's only here on TSN. Patrick Carpentier may lead the championship points race, but David Empringham would like nothing more than to win here at Mosport. This is his home track, and he has the pole, set a record in qualifying. Empringham has one win this season, but so does the Californian Chris Smith, who would like to show Empringham that indeed home field isn't that much of an advantage. Today, it is round 5 of the Players Limited Atlantic Championship from right here in Mosport, Ontario. Well, this is the final event of the Players Limited Atlantic Series, Bill, and while the championship really isn't in doubt for Patrick Carpentier, all he has to do is fire up the engine and leave the grid. The drivers will be competing for something else. Sponsorships for next year. We all know the economy and money has been tight, and they're also, I think, still fighting for recognition. Who knows, some of these people we may see in IndyCar racing.
There have been some tremendous shifts in the IndyCar field recently, and I think there is a very good chance that some or even a lot of the drivers that we're watching today will end up in these cars. It's gone that way in the past, that this has been the natural stepping stone to Indy cars, and not only just that, but there's tremendous pride on the line. Everybody wants to show up for this final race, so that if there's one person to impress in Indy, do it today. It's the last race it's always remembered.
Well, there's no doubt, and the most impressive so far has been David Empringham, who's on the pole, yes, record-setting speed, and he comes off a great second place at Mid-Ohio.
He is blisteringly fast and obviously very much at home here, and David wants to win this in a going-away fashion, so let's see if he can do it.
Well, you talk about people who have graduated from, this series, the Players Limited Atlantic, to Indy cars. This gentleman graduated and moved to the top of his class at the Michigan 500. Scott Goodyear, champion of 1986, was that it?
1986, yes.
That far back, huh?
Yeah.
Nice to have you with us. Has it changed very much?
Well, it has changed somewhat. The cars are obviously a lot quicker today. The tires are much better, and I think the drivers today are looking at it like I did in 1986, that if you can impress people here, hopefully you can impress an IndyCar team owner.
We welcome you, and we hope you enjoy your stay with us. The fourth member of our crew, as always, down in pit lane, Larry Newber.
Patrick Carpentier starts way back in 7th, and unfortunately neither one of them has a real rock-solid lead to graduate from these cars onto something else, at least right now. But the future looks bright for both of them. They both need a little bit of money. Today's race is also an opportunity for a lot of the teams to salvage this season. David himself, he's probably not going to win this Players' Championship, so he'd really love to go out with a bang. Starting in second place is Russell Spence. Now here's a guy who was the scourge of the series when the year began. He won 2 of the first 3 races. It's been downhill ever since. He crashed this week, and boy, would he like to win today. And starting in third place, Stuart Crow, the brand new RT40. The team thinks this is the best car, but they have not been close to winning yet. And starting in 4th position, speaking about Empringham, this is his teammate Robin Buck. He's been overshadowed by other Canadians. Wow, would he like to carry the checkered flag when this race at Mosport is over? This may be the last race of this season, but because of this series and the individuals involved, this truly is simply the next race in everybody's career.
Right, Larry, everyone looking ahead to next year and what may be. When we come back, it is round 5, the Players Limited Atlantic Series from Mosport Park here on TSN. This Players Limited Atlantic race is brought to you in part by Yokohama Performance Radial Tires. Now you've got control. The field is on the starting grid, ready to take their warm-up laps. Scott Goodyear, you know all about these cars, an Atlantic champion in 1986. Why don't you give us a little bit of a comparison between the Atlantic cars and the Indy cars you drive today?
This is not my usual seat. I'm usually aboard the McKenzie Financial Indy car, but a former Atlantic car is so similar to an Indy car that what you learn here can be transferred to an Indy car and help make a future champion. We talk about the similarities between a former Atlantic car and an Indy car, both aerodynamically and also from a vehicle dynamic point of view. Aerodynamically, we have the front wings, the side pods on both sides of the car, and the rear wing. A driver gets to make changes to understand how that will change his car handling aerodynamically. Also, from a suspension point of view, the toe in, toe out, caster, camber, spring rates, shock absorbers, all these things that you can change in this car are much like an Indy car. What you have here is a 3/4 size Formula Indy car. The lessons a driver learns here, both from a driving point of view and a car setup point of view, he'll be able to use when he graduates to Indy cars.
And as we say, some of these people hope to graduate, Scott. Maybe they got a look. We know that they like to put on a show in places like Toronto and, of course, in Vancouver. So maybe some of those Indy owners are looking at those drivers.
Well, they're certainly aware of the statistics at the end of the year, and when a driver goes off to IndyCar teams, he hopes to be able to say, look, this is the class that I was winning in, and it's very similar to what you're doing in Indy cars, and we hope that we have an opportunity to come test for you.
All right, let's take a look at the starting grid for this final race of the Players Limited Atlantic Series. And starting on the pole with a record speed, 3 seconds better than Claude Bourbonnais set a couple of years ago, David Empringham, second in the Players Limited points. Right alongside, from Bradford, England, Russell Spence, 3 wins this year, and he was the quickest in morning practice. Inside of row 2 is Stuart Crow from Houston, Texas, and he was second in Vancouver. He won the last race of this series. That was at Mid-Ohio, where David Empringham was second. Empringham's teammate, Robin Buck, he's had a disappointing year making the transition from the Players Limited GM Series to Atlantic Racing. Steve Cameron, the native of New Zealand, has done very well. He is second overall in total points in the series. Chris Smith in his 07, the lemon yellow. First in Montreal, first in Toronto. Chris Smith in almost every race has been the car to beat. As we take a look at the rest of the grid, and Patrick Carpentier will start outside of row 4, and he, for all intents and purposes, as soon as they leave the grid, he will have the championship. Harold Heisman from Oslo, Norway. Bert Hart, Peter Fossetta, Steve Adams, number 24. People will know him from Ajax, Ontario, a 2-time Esso Formula 1600 champion, looking to move up and has chosen Players Limited Atlantic Racing. And Frank Allers, a 1989 Atlantic champion, but he is struggling here in the final race of this season. Mosport Park, it doesn't matter who you talk to. Most drivers will tell you they love it, but will also scare you. Bill, why don't you take us on a tour?
Board with Patrick Carpentier. We're already over 130 miles an hour entering this downhill turn 1, and it has now become a flat-out corner. Listen to this. Over the crest of turn 2, one of the most feared left-hand corners in the world, and he is virtually flat once again, 135 miles an hour. Coming up to a tight right turn 3, stab the brakes for a moment, drop a gear, hard on the inside and feed power on. Let the car slide right over to the exit. Grab high gear again and head down for turn 4. This is the famous downhill chute that takes us into the hairpin corner. Hard on the brakes, all the way down here, down to bottom gear, turn in tight, set up to pass that car right ahead. But no, not the spot to do it.
Now we go to the inside. Lots of power to the wheel spin and start grabbing gears. We're out of second, third, fourth. You're just watching that tack climb as fast as possible. The car's accelerating up this long 4,000-foot uphill straight. We'll eventually reach a top speed of 148 miles per hour here. Right up ahead, there's a hump. We're going to be flat out over this hump and into what used to be a corner requiring braking. But once again, listen. Flat out 148 miles an hour through here. Gently off the gas. Drop a gear here. Fight that oversteer. Look, a little bit loose there. Over to turn 10. Lots of power coming out here. There. Once again, we're loose. One more gear. Back on the start-finish straight to complete our lap, the ultra-high-speed Mosport circuit.
You bet. It's ultra high speed, 3.9 kilometers. 30 laps is what the Players Limited Atlantic cars will do. When we come back to Mosport, round 5, the Players Limited, and it is here on TSN. Welcome back to Mosport Park, round 5 of the Players Limited Atlantic Series. Vic Roeder along with Bill Adam, Larry Newber down in pit lane, and our special guest, Scott Goodyear. Glad to have you alongside as the cars now have headed out. This is lap number 2 of their warm-up lap, as you see Charles Neerberg go by from Texas. Then they'll come to the starting grid. There's Patrick Carpentier, Heisman. They'll stop, turn off the engines, cool down, start them up. You were saying that the standing start is something that you really do miss.
Very much so, and I had an opportunity to do that a few years ago in the Formula Atlantic in '86, and I think it's one of the most exciting moments in motorsport altogether, and I wish that we had that in IndyCar, but there again, on ovals, I guess it would be impossible.
Yeah, what would it be? The fact that they had the turbocharger just wouldn't allow you to do that.
Well, turbocharged motors are somewhat to think about there, but I think the other thing too is on an oval especially, you have a scenario where the car has so much tilt and stagger put into it for the oval track itself that the car would want to go a sideways motion, much like we saw with Roberto Guerrero on the beginning lap of Indianapolis.
The beginning of Indy, that's right. It potentially could be very, very damaging for everyone. But it is exciting. I think this has always been one of the parts that is best of all.
Billy, interesting choice here made by David Empringham in his pert car. You see it in the foreground. He has chosen to take the pole, but to the outside.
Yeah, this is rather strange, but maybe we got a highlight of this through the last race in this series, where the pole sitter also chose the opposite side of the track. To talk about it being like that. Apparently his thinking in doing it this way is that most of the traffic down the front straight stays on the left-hand side to stay set up for turn 1, of course, being a right-hand corner. And because of the traffic going over here, that there will be better traction because of the rubber being laid down. The gamble may backfire. There's also obviously gas spilled, there's oil dropped from the cars, and he may actually lose traction. But the one thing in his favor is, even if the car in second place stays alongside going through turn 1, he definitely will not stay alongside going through turn 2, which is a downhill left-hander. So David, I think, is smart.
But it's interesting. It is Russell Spence who is alongside Scott. And he had the quickest time in
warm-up this morning, so it's very interesting to see. Russell Spence was a little bit quicker in warm-up this morning, so there's something to think about there. And even as Bill says, he gets a good line going into turn 1. Will he hold it going into turn 2? That's what we're going to have to wait and see.
And this is probably one of the best corners on any racetrack. As you come across the start-finish line, you dive in. It's a right-hander, and it's flat out.
Yeah, particularly. And as fast as these cars are under acceleration, they are not going to get to any sort of a speed that will approach a point where they have to lift. Larry?
Story about David starting in a pole. Bill, you hit it right on the nose. A couple of the little things that go along with that. Number one, he feels the cars are better, and then he can maintain that outside line a little easier around corner number 1. And he says, boy, if I do that, I am really in Fat City for corner number 2. So David is already thinking ahead about a half a mile down the road.
A field of 16 cars on the starting grid, and as we say now, they'll fire them back up, take one more lap, come to that standing start. This is an anxious little moment. Let's talk a little bit about David Empringham. He's got Procter & Gamble. His teammate is in a Face-L car. He's in a PERT car. What's really interesting, to the credit of Procter & Gamble, they have sponsored this Canadian team. Very few Canadian teams have done that. Canadian companies. Mackenzie has done it with you, Scott. Now he has gone to the United States, and that's why he went to Mid-Ohio last week, trying to sell the Canadian program to Procter & Gamble in the United States. And so next year, he may just run the whole series. You don't get a lot of Canadian companies involved in racing that way. Welcome back to Mosport Park, round 5 of the Players Limited Atlantic Series. The championship is on the line. It all but belongs to Patrick Carpentier, as he will take the green flag here. The starting grid, 16 cars, and on the pole in your foreground is David Empringham, as they have fired up these cars now, getting ready for one more lap just to get the tires warm again, and then we will have the standing start. The standing start, something that you enjoyed and you say you missed from IndyCar, Scott.
Very much so. It's a really emotional time for the driver, a very exciting time, but there's so much that can go right, so much that can go wrong. We've seen it many times in Formula One where a guy will stall, another guy comes up behind him and hits him, and you can have tragic results, but the standing start for sure is one of the most exciting times for a driver.
As much as I always have advised my sons not to get into Atlantic racing, Scott, I think they do practice the standing start on a regular basis. I keep looking at the cars and noticing that they're doing a fine job smoking up the tires. Much like the AA fuelers, when we watch the NHRA drag racing on TV, you see them do the famous burnout where they have this huge cloud of smoke. Basically, in a nutshell, that's what the Atlantic cars want to do. They have to heat the tires up to the optimum temperature where they're getting the traction that they're designed for. The race tires are designed to work in a very small area of traction, not too hot, not too cold. And what David is doing right now, is we're on board with him, is to try and get his car and tires up to temperature. Just weaving back and forth very gently there in the straight, just adding a little bit. In fact, sometimes keep an eye on the right front tire as he's doing this, and you could sometimes see some shading in the tire. You can just watch coloration differences and see as the tire starts to work. If you take an eraser and draw it across a piece of paper.
Now as they come up over this little hump at the top of the Andretti straight, and this is a flat out turn 8, isn't it?
It is now, which is really quite incredible. Earlier when I spoke to David, he was saying 148 miles an hour through that thing flat out, doesn't lift, and he was talking about it just going, ooh, and that is quick.
Well, Scott, interesting thing that David has decided here as they come up then to the starting grid again. As the pole sitter, he had his choice of being inside or outside, and he has chosen to sit outside to go into turn 1.
Very much so. It's something different than we've seen many other times before, because usually a driver would like to go on the inside of the turn to protect his position, but like Billy mentioned, there's not many times a driver is going to be able to go into turn 1 from the start and have to lift, especially with these Atlantic cars with the grip that they have today, with the tires they have. And talking about tire warm-up, the front tires are usually harder to get warmed up than the rears. The rears you can spin and accelerate and bring the heat into them so quickly. The fronts you really have to work on the car, like we saw with David Empringham, really trying to get the tires warmed up. So the thing to watch is to see if a guy going into turn 1 right now is going to have the front of his car push out. Now maybe with David on the outside, he's getting a wide line, like a racing line, a wide entry, clip the apex, wide on the exit, getting himself set up for turn 2. If he bobbles though on the start and anybody can come up on the inside of him, he's lost the inside protective line.
All right, Patrick Carpentier, we were with him for just a second as we wait now for the green light, the green flag. Carpentier, when he starts, he will be crowned the Players Limited Atlantic Champion, and we have a green, and we'll head into the first corner, and Carpentier immediately drives to the outside, and you can see what an advantage was for Empringham to take the outside.
Empringham got off the line just perfectly, exactly what he wanted to happen, whereas we're watching in second place, the car smoked the tires. On the inside, he did not have the same traction. Carpentier, I think, got the start of the year as far as he was concerned. He really just drove brilliantly away from the start.
And of course, with that, he picks up an additional bonus of $10,000. Patrick Carpentier, your Players Limited Atlantic Champion. There, though, is the record setter here. He qualified 3 seconds faster than the previous time set by Claude Bourbonnais. That is David Empringham.
That's just an astonishing time. That's an average speed of 120 miles an hour thereabout. To think about a track like Mosport, which is so difficult, it's just phenomenal. You can see right on the tail, though, that number 12 car, the red and white car, just second place right there. That's Russell Spence. Now, as you remember, Russell had that horrible accident in Vancouver, but look at this. Tremendous straight line speed by Spence.
As he looked to the inside, and Empringham, of course, in a Swift, and then there's Spence in a Renard.
Yes, and we've seen the Reynard really come on strong this year, and one wonders where Stuart Crow is with the Ralt RT40. He dominated last week at Mid-Ohio, and it looks like he's there in third. And all these guys are just trying to make sure that the tires are warmed up, everything is going well, trying not to use the engine too much, and from that point onwards, they're going to now be in a chase with David Empringham.
It's really nice to see, too, that David's teammate, Robin Buck, who qualified fourth and is still running fourth right now in these opening laps, that Robin is having a really good race. This is kind of a home track for him as well, and he desperately needs to finish well, I think, just for a boost in his own confidence.
Very much so, and he's the partner on the Kanaska team to David Empringham, and both of them have run strong throughout the year. David's put a lot more testing time in than Robin, and I think David had an opportunity last year to run some Atlantic races, which probably gave him a head start on this year.
Yeah, I think that does help. We all get rusty. Well, I get rusty when I sit out of a car. You don't, Scott, but...
Up the Mario and Andretti straight. For the second time, we're on lap 2 of a 30-lap Players Limited Atlantic finale here at Mosport. And, of course, you'll have to get rid of some of that rust because you're going to move on and you'll be participating and driving in the Players Limited Cup here on TSN. We'll have that a little later for you as the ASA Stalkers come to Mosport.
That's right. I'm going to change my name to Billy Joe Bob Adam and get out there and lay some metal on him. Well, here's a fella just laying some fiberglass around this track right now. He is pulling away from Spence very convincingly. It appears that initial burst of speed that Spence showed up the straight was not matched the last time. And I don't exactly know what would explain that. In fact, maybe you know something, Scott.
Well, it was interesting to see. Certainly he would have had a draft going up the first time coming out of the Moss's turn. But it's just interesting to see there that David has so much confidence in that car. He's taken a nice smooth line through corner 2 using both the double apexes that you want to pick up. And I watched the Spence car and it seemed a little bit nervous going down into the turn and a little bit tight line. So it's very interesting to see maybe he's not happy with the setup of the car. And as you know, Billy, we can adjust the car. The cockpit has adjustable sway bars inside. So now maybe the driver is looking to make sure the car can work a little bit better so he won't lose touch with David, start to mount a little bit of a challenge so he can go up and hopefully keep in tow with him. And with that, we're watching Robin Buck. Looks like maybe he's lost a position or two, unfortunately, and is on his charge back. He looks to be back about 6th or 7th spot.
That's right. I think Robin did suffer some sort of problem. He has dropped back to 6th place by my count. But David Empringham, the teammate here, is just flying around. Now, David and Robin do most of their testing at this track. As I said, Mosport is the home track, and testing, like anything you practice, can be a tremendous advantage to you. You're much more comfortable, and when you take a track like this where it's so fast with so many blind corners, I think it really, really does work out to be a tremendous advantage.
As we ride along now with Patrick Carpentier, the 1992 Players Limited Atlantic champion, this 20-year-old is currently in 10th place, and he really never got, this is his first look at Mosport. Who knows? I mean, it's a kind of track that can really give you some butterflies.
It can certainly scare you. And I think one thing that both Billy and I had the opportunity to do, because we lived in the region here, was to have a chance to really learn racing at places like Mosport. And for myself, I've then gone to tracks in Europe and all the way throughout the United States, and no other track really picks up and grabs you like this track. You take turn 2 or turn 4. Turn 4, Nicky Lauda wrote in his book, is one of the most difficult turns anywhere in the world. And if you take those 2 turns and you can actually enter into them at 135 miles an hour into a blind turn and keep your foot on the gas and really pick up and do that, then you can probably just about drive anywhere in North America or Europe on any racetrack.
Oh, yes, David Empringham locked it up right there as he went through 10 and now heads down the front chute, and locking them up has allowed Spence to close it up.
Spence did close right up. They have both pulled out a pretty substantial gap back to that 3rd place car, but I think Spence is certainly in a position to mount a challenge right now. And this is something that Spence also needs. He is running a car that is quite radically different from the style of Atlantic car that we've seen over the past season or two. And you can see that it almost looks like a miniature Formula One car, like a little Williams or something. The car, by all standards, puts out tremendous downforce, and part of that downforce is, of course, lost. And Scott, I'm sure you can explain that, how when you're following somebody, you don't get the proper airflow.
Very much so, and we saw that at Indianapolis this year where the car in front gets nice clean air, and the car really needs that clean air to go over the front wings, through the tunnels, which make all the downforce in the car, up around the back of the engine cowling and over the rear wing. And with that, you get a nice, clean flow of air going over the car. It works very well.
Boy, he's right up on his tail now.
Spence is taking a charge of that dirty air. He's going to try and pop on the inside or maybe the outside here. David's running a protective line. Can they go side by side through turn 8?
Oh, my. Flat out, Spence had an idea. The rookie driver, the 32-year-old from Bradford, England, Russell Spence, has won 3 times so far this season and some $38,000, but he had a look. He couldn't get around the pole sitter and the leader from the green light, David Empringham.
As we were talking about dirty air and clean air, the driver behind gets a little bit of a run through that dirty air that's coming off the car because the car in front is actually opening up the airspace for him, and it's not taking as much energy and horsepower to push the car through the air. He gets a good shot like we saw with Spence coming up to David Empringham at the top of turn 8. But the thing to remember is that also no air going towards the car. You're cutting a clean hole through the air, but unfortunately you're not getting the air to the front wings, and that causes a handling problem.
Larry?
Yeah, Jeff Barker's been in the pits twice now. They can't find the problem. It's something in the engine compartment, and Jeff is complaining that the car simply won't pull off the corners, and down to the end of the straightaways, he's losing all of his power, all of his RPMs. They didn't find the problem. They just tried to clean up the inside as best they could and send him back on his way.
Barker, the 41-year-old from El Segundo, California, has struggled in his Reynard. The former motorcycle rider has done no better than a 12th position, and that was in Montreal. As you take a look at Russell Spence, still trying to chase down David Empringham.
He's inspired right now that Russell Spence qualified almost a full second slower at just a huge amount of time. And yet, he is staying right with David. David is running very, very quickly right here. You can see he's still using up all of the track. He's running well. And obviously, the car sounds great. So his speed is very fast. But Spence is driving with inspiration right now.
Very much so. It's going to be interesting to see now. We have two cars with David Empringham with a Swift and then Spence with the Reynard. How the tire wear is going to come into a factor here, and with the fuel load burning off and the tires going through the abuse that they take, you know, is one car going to start working better than the other car at mid-fuel load or mid-race towards the end of the race? Can David maybe start to pull out, or is he going to fight the car and allow Spence to come up from behind him? Either way we look at it, I think we're going to have a very exciting race, because it seems like these two guys now are starting to pull away from the rest of the field.
Yeah, I think they are. Something here, this makes a very interesting comparison as we're on board with David Empringham right. Oh, and there's a
Chris Smith
is pulled off.
Exactly, a two-time winner so far this year. Chris Smith, one in Montreal, one in Trois-Rivières, and he is the overall points leader when you combine both the Canadian and American series. He has been dominant, winning more than $50,000.
And just in case we have first-time viewers watching these Atlanta cars, no, he did not break the steering wheel. That has to come off for him to get out of the car.
Sometimes a driver may want to break the steering wheel.
Yeah.
It's interesting, we're talking about testing. I was up here earlier this year when the Kanaska team was with David Empringham, Robin Buck, and also with Chris Smith up here doing the testing. Now, Smith has done a lot of testing here this year, but it's interesting to see that he only qualified 6th on the grid. I really expected that maybe he'd be up in the front row here, so maybe he has a problem weekend so far, and things have not worked out well for him.
Well, you can see him walking away and probably talking to a marshal and shrugging his shoulders, answering the question, what's wrong? And he just, I don't know. It just quit.
Actually, I thought he had walked that direction because he could position himself in front of the Players Limited billboard and just pay a thanks to the people that are putting this wonderful racing on.
Larry?
Well, I'm standing by with Will Applinger. That's his Chris Smith's crew chief, and he has dropped out of the race. Any idea as to what happened, Willie?
No, I have no idea. It could be the engine or the gearbox, or I only heard it's mechanical over the speaker with the...
Well, people like you and I had a great view of the start. He had a terrific start, too, to today's race, didn't he?
Yeah, I was impressed about the start, but...
Well, we'll try and get with Chris Smith a little bit later, but he's broken out on course. We'll keep our eyes open for him, but tough break for this guy. Has been very fast, along with his crew chief, all year long.
You betcha he has 2 wins, as we say, in Montreal and Trois-Rivières.
Chris certainly has been impressive this year. That win of his at Trois-Rivières was really brilliant. Now, what is this?
Well, this is Charles Neerberg out of Dallas trying to hold off Patrick Carpentier in that ethnic ad car.
Carpentier is doing something today that I've not seen him do before, and that on board we may get a pretty clear view of this. Watch his actions on the steering wheel, and he seems to be trying to muscle this car around. Every track we've seen Patrick at so far, he's been just beautifully smooth, but here I think maybe his discomfort level with Mosport shows through, and that he's driving the car in kind of a nervous position.
Neerberg currently in 7th place, the 41-year-old from Dallas, and Carpentier in 8th.
Heading back down the straights between turns 3 and 4, here's the downhill chute. Frightening piece of track. If we had peripheral television screens for you to see through, it is just about terrifying going down here because it is so fast, and it appears that it's about 2 feet wider than your car the faster you go.
As you say, and you know that very well, Billy, from racing here, and as you come down the hill, many things go through your mind. It just looks like you're about ready to go up the hill, and there's going to be no road for you to be able to turn.
Now up the Andretti straight. Carpentier, it is simply a drag race as they come up. Watch the hump. And now who will have the line going into turn 8?
Now watch the outside. He tries it, he does it. Wonderful outside pass by Patrick Carpentier.
That was a nice move, and you have to think that he's from the outside. He knows he has a line. You can see the car go sideways there. You can tell he's pushing it 110%. Just a real nice job.
Yeah, Patrick really does appear to be pushing today. It's noticeably different when we get back inside the David Empringham car and get his camera shot just to compare the two driving styles. Just try and keep in mind when we watched Patrick, the amount of wheel motion, his hands, everything was happening in the car. And then when we do see David again, just try and compare those two styles. It's very interesting.
Carpentier, we should remind everyone, did not race at all last year, but in previous years he has raced sedans, and he does have Formula 2000 experience here at Mosport, or not here at Mosport, but Formula 2000, especially at Tremblant, of course, in Quebec. But this is his first look at Mosport.
Well, if you talk about Tremblant, Vic, I think that's another track here in Canada. I guess we probably have the two toughest tracks anywhere in the world. If you can tame both Tremblant and Mosport, I think that you are going to be able to go off and try any track in the world and say, I can conquer that one too.
Even bungee jumping's easy after those.
Bungee jumping, that's something I don't think I would do.
No.
And he's in a very difficult position here, don't you think, Bill? I mean, he does not need to win the race. He has the championship locked up, the Players Limited Atlantic Championship. Now you're doing it, it's a professional pride that comes through.
Yes, it is. And I think it's very good training for Patrick in that basically he doesn't have anything to gain for the Canadian Championship. He realized more than his goals. He wanted to do well this year, but as he told us earlier, that he had no true thoughts of winning this championship. He's remarkably down to earth with no real huge ego, but here he is. He now will be the Canadian champion.
As we go back to our leader, excuse me, Bill, this is David Empringham, and he is starting to stretch it out now over Russell Spence.
This is certainly a time where a driver is looking to make no mistakes. He's trying to get 100% out of the car, driving to the corner as deep as possible, making sure he doesn't lock up the brakes, flat spot the tires. We saw David going a little bit hard at turn 10 a little bit earlier, but he also, as you know, Billy, has the adjustable brake bias in the car, so maybe the car like to have a little bit less braking on the front. He can turn that and put it to his liking.
That's true.
Here's Larry.
Standing by right now with Marty Knoll, Patrick Carpentier's crew chief, and by the way, Patrick will be coming by here shortly, so Marty may have to catch him on the stopwatch. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Patrick's race. Let's let him go by here. He's coming up. I want to tell you that Patrick slowed down seemingly at the beginning of this race. The past 4 or 5 laps, he's been picking up a lot of speed. Was that planned, Marty?
No, he just wanted to run, carefully and finish the race. He wants to finish, so now that he's got by Nürburgring, I see he's picking it up.
So that was part of the plan, though, to put all your emphasis on finishing and not necessarily winning?
Well, mostly on starting. We wanted to make sure, and I think it kind of took his attention away. His focus out a little bit. Now that he's got that by and he's settling down a little bit, it's starting to, well, he's got another 15, so we're doing good.
Well, Scott, Bill, and Vic, it's very exciting here at Mosport. The crews are hanging right over the pit wall, and this straightaway may be short, but particularly Bill and Scott, you can attest, this is an exciting place.
I think Patrick is making it exciting for us too, Larry. We're getting some of these in-car shots here, and he's treating this car more like a slide car than he is a Formula. Look at this. He's just really getting that thing loose and sideways, going into and out of corners.
There's no doubt he is a very talented driver, this 20-year-old rookie, but you also have to go have a good car, and Patrick knows that.
Yeah, I think so, because we did some testing before the year. We had 2 days, and then in between races we always tested. And Pierre-Philippe is a good teacher too, to explain me. I understand what's happening is that I'm understanding more mechanical, so I can give him feedback as soon as I get in, so that's what helping us.
I know that, in fact, that is a compliment to you whenever I hear the Walker Motorsports team and your Mackenzie Financial team in IndyCar racing. Your crew chief has always said, what I like about Scott is he can come in and he can tell me right away what the car is doing, and we can go and pinpoint something. And that is something a driver has to be able to do, is sense where the trouble is and then ask his his crew to fix it.
Very much so, and I think my biggest learning year for setting up a race car came in the Players Atlantic Series type cars in 1986, and that was when I was running for Tom Mitchell Racing, and then I moved on to Chris Clark Racing. And in those years, I had an opportunity to work with people like Colin Stewart, and probably the biggest guy going these days is Don Schneiders. And he was a guy that taught me that I have to relay what's happening with the car. I have to feel what's happening with the car so I can tell the people in the pits. And with that, then you can actually turn and say, hey, this is what the car is doing. I watch Patrick's car, and I think now that the car turns in maybe a little bit too positive, and then it goes to a push situation on a low-speed turn, so it's sort of something like mechanical grip. And the high-speed stuff, maybe it's turning in well, and maybe the grip as well, but there's two different things, mechanical grip and aero grip, and this is something that a driver has to decipher. And here we see a great battle.
Harold Heisman in a battle with Robin Buck grabs him and moves into 5th position.
That's a shame for Robin because he really wants to push the car hard this weekend, and he's had so many good runs that have been spoiled by some little mechanical problems throughout the year. But it looks like he's driving very, very hard, and now he's got to turn his thinking around. He had a driver behind him for quite a few laps that maybe he was trying to hold off, and now the whole thing is that he has to turn around and go back on the charge and try and chase him back down.
Heisman, the 33-year-old rookie from Oslo, Norway, is now in 5th with Robin Buck from Toronto playing catch-up. We're at Mosport Park, the Players Limited Atlantic Series on TSN. Welcome back to Mosport, round 5, the final race of 1992, the Players Limited Atlantic Series, and it has been a very purty kind of race for David Empringham as he has led right from the green light. And he is stretching it out, continually stretching it out now over Russell Spence. Vic Rauter along with Bill Adam, Larry Newber, and we welcome Scott Goodyear. Now, I guess you start, as they suggest, maybe hearing the gremlins and things. Do you listen for other things when you're in the car and you're comfortably in front?
Well, I think the most important thing is that he's smooth, he's concentrated, and he's actually doing the same thing lap after lap, and that's into a rhythm, and the rhythm that we look for all the time, hopefully it happens on lap 1. David seems to be into that rhythm. You can see there again, turn 2 looks just like it did when we watched him going through their lap 2 or 3 into the race, and now he's into a scenario where everything has to come smoothly for him, effortlessly, and he's just sitting back, and you can see him, as we mentioned before, Billy, just turning the car smoothly and planting it to where he wants to. No movements, rough movements with the car, and he's not overworking the car.
Well, he sure isn't sawing on the steering wheel as Patrick Carpentier is.
No, isn't it amazing? It really is a dramatically different picture that we're seeing here. And part of that is David's style. Part of it is the car setup, too. That perhaps he and his team do more testing here, so they've been able to learn which shock settings, which spring settings, and so on work the best. But David obviously is very, very comfortable at the speed he's running, and that speed is pulling him further and further away in first place.
It's interesting you say, Scott, about a rhythm, because I've heard Mosport described that way as a track where you can get into a rhythm. You have to get into a rhythm. If you want to dance to a different beat, well, it's going to beat you back. It's going to really, you're going to punish you.
Yes. Very much so. No matter if you're in a short race or a long race at Mosport, if you're not into a rhythm, the track can turn around and bite you because the car always wants to be on edge to make it go fast. And as you can just see the car with David going through and absorbing the bumps, it looks like the car is working very, very well. Here again in turn 2, everything is going so smooth for him. And the track, if you make one small mistake, there's tracks around the country where actually you can have a lot of runoff area. But unfortunately, Mosport is not one of them.
No, it really isn't. That because of the nature of the elevation changes and the blind corners, that this place bites you in a hurry.
David Empringham knows as well as anybody what it takes to go fast here at Mosport. It's his home track, and he did set a record-setting speed.
The key to this place is time. I'm fortunate. I definitely have a bit of an unfair advantage in that this is where my racing career has grown. Right from the beginning. In fact, my very first time in a race car was in the Spinard David School at Mosport. So in the past 5 years, I spent a lot of time here, and Kanaska Racing has spent a lot of time here, so we know the track well. I believe we've set the car up very well, and it's a matter of just trying to get every little tenth out of it. But I think that most of the other drivers would agree with me that corner 2 is a place that really gets your heart pumping. It's a blind corner at about 140 miles an hour, and something about it, your foot doesn't want us to stay planted against the floor.
And that's it. He just went through corner 2. Is it true you really do want to let off?
Well, sometimes you wonder, and you know, you have to creep up onto it, and if the car is working well, then you can go blasting over the top of 2 with 100% confidence. But if the car is slightly off when you're on the limit, sometimes just a little movement out of the back end of the car feels like a huge movement.
Larry?
It's Kevin Baltimore. Kevin is Robin Buck's crew chief. They're watching for both of their drivers, David Empringham and Kevin Baltimore. Or Robin Buck make that. Kevin, we've watched Robin back up. Is there a problem with the car to the best of your knowledge?
Unfortunately, I don't have radio communication with Robin right now. I think he can hear me, but I can't hear him, so I'm not sure if there's a distinct problem with the car or not.
What are the stopwatches telling you? The car is going slower, or is it maintained the speed that it started at?
He's maintaining a consistent speed. Unfortunately, it's not what he needs to maintain his position.
Well, for this team that had qualified so well this weekend, they really wanted to do much better.
There's no doubt about that, because Robin was 4th in qualifying. This 30-year-old, he's a rookie in this series, though a veteran of the Players Limited GM. He's a former Canadian Formula 4 champion, so he knows what open wheel racing is about. But as a rookie, and when you're trying to win sponsorship and make your career go, you can't afford this kind of thing.
Well, really, I think Robin's doing a tremendous job today. And when I was in Formula Ford racing back in 1980, Robin was one of the only guys in the country that could actually beat me. So it was really a guy that I looked forward to say, oh, Robin Buck's showing up this weekend. But we watched the car go through. It seems a little bit twitchy and a little bit nervous. So maybe he's not as comfortable with that car as David Empringham is with his. But Robin, David Empringham, Patrick, we have so many talented Canadians in this country, and so many of them running here in the Players Limited Series, that I think that we have to say, you know, this is a great motorsport series. David is doing an excellent job, and I think without a doubt there's going to be guys moving from this series into bigger things.
I agree.
It continues to be David Empringham as we ride along with the Players Limited Atlantic champion Patrick Carpentier here on TSN. Welcome back to Mosport as we take a look at Patrick Carpentier, and getting a little bit of pressure from Charles Neerberg out of Dallas, Texas. The 41-year-old was right up on his tail, but now Patrick, almost as if he maybe had a problem, Billy, finally got it back in gear. He may have just missed a shift coming out of 10 there.
Yeah, we can see that Patrick is really running away right now, but the thing that kind of concerns me is that Patrick's car continues to look very nervous, and I think it's maybe a combination of the car perhaps not being set up as much as he would like, and Patrick's own nervousness, and sometimes these can go hand in hand. There was a comment a little while back by David Empringham when he said that turn 2, this blind downhill left-hander, is now a 140-mile-an-hour corner. Well, there is nothing quite gets your heart jump-started like having the back of the car be twitchy over the crest of that hill. I tell you, that gets things going.
There you see the number 86 of Frank Allers from British Columbia, former champion. He is now a back marker. In fact, he started at the back of the pack in his number 86. And now Spence will try and take over and pass Allers, and takes up the chase again of David Empringham. Spence, well, he's very happy to say goodbye, Canada. Thanks very much, because Canada has been rough on Russell.
We've had such a torrid time. At Montreal, we had a misfire, then blew the clutch on the line. At Toronto was slightly better. We qualified on pole, but then had a big problem. We won the shock absorbers in the race. It's just been a tough time. And then today, we were on pole position. The car was really good. The team's done an excellent job. And went over turn 2 when there was oil there. There was no flags or anything, and destroyed the car.
Boy, did he ever destroy it in Vancouver on the Saturday before the Molson Indy.
Scary accident too. Really
and there's a situation with a street course that we talked about before. Some tracks don't have enough runoff area. And a street course, everybody knows that the slightest mistake can maybe just cause a bent wheel or a bent toe link or something of that nature. But if it turns into anything more than a small moment, then certainly you could lose a car, and it's unfortunate that that happened for them.
Yeah, it is. And you know, Russell, it's so nice. I always enjoy listening to the English. They keep on with this wonderful attitude of, well, yeah, we destroyed the $200,000 car, but it's only a minor problem, and I'll have it fixed by the morning. they just come back and they race really hard, or they keep doing whatever they have to. And Russell and his mechanic, I think, that was interviewed in Vancouver, they have this wonderful attitude about everything and said, well, yeah, we had a rough go, but we'll be back.
David Empringham continues to lead here at Mosport. Larry?
Something for the three of you to look for. At least 3 corners have reported a loose front wheel, or the apparent front loose wheel on Stuart Crow. Now, a loose wheel, that sounds incredible to me, but that's what at least 3 corners have reported, so we ought to take a look.
That may be very interesting, and I think he certainly wants to get that checked out as fast as possible before he goes over the crest of turn 2.
Stuart Crow in his number 3. The 32-year-old from Dallas is currently running in 3rd place.
And that in itself, that can be almost a nightmare. When you are running well, the last thing you want to do is to stop and check. Now, hopefully he does have radio communication with his crew chief, because this is not something that you gamble on. You may keep a car on the track because of low fuel or overheating or something like that, but a wheel, you can't gamble. That's something potentially could be just disastrous.
And with a driver, it certainly plays on his mind, because, as you said, Billy, you don't want to come in and check, because you hate yourself afterwards if you come in and it's not loose. There's nothing wrong with the car. You realize the space that you have lost on the racetrack, and in a race like this that's so short, there's no way that you're ever going to make the time up.
Right.
Yeah, but, and I don't mean to be naive, but would you not as a driver feel that?
Well, you feel that, but I mean, there's so much going on with these cars because they're on the limit. I mean, if it's a little bit loose and you feel something going on, certainly you may, hey, maybe it's just a tire going off or going down, or it's, you know, it's lost a little bit of traction, and you just continue driving with that, especially in a short race like this. On an IndyCar race, it's somewhat different. You try to get to your next fuel stop so you can go in and have the guys do all the 4 tire changes and the fuel. But in this situation here, if the corner workers are reporting, they're thinking they're seeing a loose wheel, well, then Stuart has to be very, very aware of it.
Tell me, Scott, I've always stayed in cars with fenders on them, and I've never driven an open wheel car, but when you're in something like this, would you necessarily be aware of a wheel being loose because your vision, your focus is so far ahead?
Well, you would do, because your peripheral vision is picking up the front wheels, and then you can look in the mirrors and see the rear wheels. And then with that, that's how we usually see if we think a tire is going flat. You can actually look at the front wheels and see the contour and the colorization of the tires. If it looks like it's going flat, you can pick that up, and you look in the mirrors to pick up the rear ones. But what's happening, I think, with here in this situation, that is the corner workers, as I mentioned before, are reporting they see the wheel loose. Can you imagine what it's doing for Stuart Crow in his car? I can't think that it would be that loose and he wouldn't come in to have it checked if indeed the corner workers are correct.
I hope he's paying attention.
David Empringham is in a rhythm. He has led from the green light, and he looks to be coasting now here in race 5 of the Players Limited Atlantic Series on TSN. And it looks like the day is over for Robin Buck, and it has been that kind of a season for Buck.
He has had just terrible luck. I mean, as Scott's pointed out, and we all know, he is such a good driver and such a good spokesman for his sponsor and racing in general. And this is just, it's the culmination of a season of bad luck. Obviously, he has a motor problem, just coasted to a stop with steam coming out the exhaust pipe.
And disappointing, because Mosport is his hometown track, and he's another one of the drivers that's mastered Mosport and can master any track probably in the world. And somewhat disappointing. I know that they're going to go on and do a couple of other races throughout the season. I know there's one at Nazareth and one at Laguna. I think Robin will definitely do the one at Laguna. But a talented driver, and I guess every season you look at it and you say, you know, what did I accomplish this year? He has the experience. I think he's shown people that he can certainly drive one of these cars. Next year, hopefully, they have the whole package together and can go out there and start winning races.
I hope so, and I think that flag right there we just saw for a moment, the red and yellow striped, that was showing a slippery condition up at turn 8, which is just 2 corners before the spot where Robin pulled off the track. So I expect that he maybe put a connecting rod through part of the motor where it doesn't normally go.
And that's terrible. That's being polite, Billy. I think where it normally doesn't go. That's an expensive proposition, probably about a $25,000 or a $30,000 problem when you put a motor or a rod through a motor. And I think that's probably why we saw Robin start to move back, because the motor was starting to go south.
But let's keep an eye too as David goes up the straight here. Now he is approaching the area where we saw that oil flag. He's boxed in a little bit by traffic, and unfortunately he's forced into the inside part of the track. Let's watch for any dark spots in the pavement, see if he runs into. Yeah, see that he did slide a little bit wide there, so there is something slippery on the pavement. He has to be very careful up through here.
Now he gets into some of these back markers, and of course this is all of a benefit to Russell Spence. As you take a look, and you just saw Stuart Crow going by, and moving up there is in his Pope racing machine. Steve Cameron, the New Zealander. And this has become very much an international field, as a lot of people, when you look at, Heisman from Norway, Spence from England, a lot of these drivers are looking at this Players Limited Atlantic Series as a stepping stone to bigger and better things.
Bigger and faster.
Better and faster, yes. And
Oh!
more expensive. What a tremendous crash.
Big crash. That looks like on the outside of turn 3, perhaps.
And that is Russell Spence. And the day has come, unbelievably, to an end for him. And he gets out of that car limping.
You can see that the flagger right there has called for medical help. He has signaled over. These people are trained. Yeah, they're calling also. They're going to get a tow truck. As Spence is on the ground in pain.
This is going to open up a very interesting situation with the tow truck coming out. Is it going to be a local yellow, or is it going to be a full course yellow? Indeed, if it's a full course yellow, we're going to end up with a situation with a pack going to a restart, and then will anybody be able to mount a challenge going on to David?
Look at this. Look at that rear wheel. The left rear wheel in the car is already broken. And look, unbelievable impact into the tire wall there. Something had snapped on the left rear suspension as he approached the corner. So instead of the car turning right, it turned itself hard left and almost hit that barrier head on.
And that's a scary thing. Whenever anything breaks on a race car and you become a passenger, then you're out of control of the car, and that's a terrible feeling. And yes, indeed, we have the full course yellow that we spoke about before. And I think with this now, I mean, many things come into play. Can the guys keep their tires clean and warm after the restart comes on? Will anybody be able to challenge David?
That's the ambulance coming out on the track. They will try and get down to the driver. That's a great sign to see him sitting up. He now has just gone through 2 horrendous accidents right in a row. He went through that wild one at Vancouver and now here.
And thankfully there was no fire in this one, as there was in, remember, Vancouver. There was the explosion after he hit the wall.
Fireball.
Here, though, the car hit those, and it looks like he may have, way he got out, either banged up that hip and leg very badly, maybe even broken it, but he is taking some deep breaths, and I think thankful to be in this position right now, sitting up.
I would expect some sort of a leg injury. It's really good to see him sitting up, but that leads to our suspicions that his back at least is all right, and something in the lower leg, because he was limping as he ran away from that wreck.
Russell Spence from Bradford, England, in some pain. The leader continues to be David Empringham. We are late in round 5 of the Players Limited Atlantic on TSN. Welcome back to Mosport. Vic Rauter along with Bill Adam, Larry Newber, Scott Goodyear, and the rescue workers have now reached Russell Spence after a tremendous crash. And you're right, look at that.
The left rear
wheel is already broken.
It has probably has broken the upright, and these cars approach that corner. They only brake very slightly, drop 1 gear, so they're probably still running 125 miles an hour. That's the speed that he impacted that barrier at. And once again, we unfortunately get to look at the structural integrity of these cars. Scott, you just pointed out that years ago, the old Atlantic cars would not have done this, and now, thank God, he got out.
Well, it's good to see him up and moving around. And yes, years ago when I was involved with the RT4 as a tubular structure, I don't think that we maybe would have withstood that type of impact. But now, at least he gets out underneath his own power, and they're obviously going to take him off and look at him in the intern hospital. And we hope that everything is up and moving so he can go on and continue.
Oh, just dreadful luck after he went through a violent crash out in Vancouver when you were running the McKenzie IndyCar, and Russell had this huge crash out there with his car, just totally wrote it off, and obviously that's going to be a write-off too. So really sad for that team from England.
The possibility now, of course, to end this race under a yellow condition. Spence started the year, Larry mentioned it just at the beginning of the race. He dominated this series. He won 3 races almost right out of the start, right out of the gate, and now he has just had nothing but bad luck. And as he said to us earlier, he was just saying, thank you very much, Canada, and good riddance. I haven't had much luck up here.
Boy.
And the bad luck continues here at Mosport.
It really does. It's just terrible. You can see David is just going around the track there. He just took a little glance over to the side, and I'm sure that he was able to pick up Russell as being attended to there. So that's a bit of a relief for David.
A $60,000 purse in every Players Limited Atlantic race, and the winner will get $10,000 as the track workers taking the added precaution of putting on the neck collars to keep the head still just in case there is a back problem. But we saw Russell Spence sitting up a little earlier.
Yeah, with the impact being almost a front-on impact too, I really do suspect that it is some sort of a lower leg problem for Russell.
Well, he seemed like he was quite a tall guy when he got out of the car, and I noticed that the cars are so small today. When I sat in an Atlantic car, they seem like they've gotten narrow, just like our Indy car has. And the designers want to make the car as small as possible to get through the air as quickly as possible, but then again, you jeopardize driver safety.
Larry?
Well, just a couple of things. First of all, Stuart Crow says, I can't find anything wrong with this car. He wasn't going to come in under any circumstances, certainly under yellow. As far as Russell Spence's pit crew, actually, we all, because of the television, know more than what they know, but the signs are pretty good. And I'm also told this will be the final lap. So David Empringham's going to get this one handed to him, but you got to say, he deserved it, didn't he, guys?
He sure has deserved it, because he comes in with the record qualifying speed, and he has led right from the green light.
And I hasten to mention this, but who was the one that predicted a flag-to-flag victory by David Empringham?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I guess we have to give him that without a doubt. But David's had one of those weekends that a driver wishes for. Obviously, he's sat on pole, he's led flag to flag, and that's the type of weekend that when you get out of the car, it just feels great.
Yeah.
And here he is taking the checkered
Good
flag,
for you,
a nice,
David.
classy win.
Well done.
So David Empringham picks up his second win in the Players Limited Atlantic Series. He won in Toronto, he was second in Trois-Rivières, and he wins here at Mosport. And as David says, you know, looking back, the two races that he wasn't able to finish, Montreal and Vancouver, may have cost him a chance at winning this year's Players Limited Atlantic Championship.
Yep.
Congratulations as well to Patrick Carpentier, who is the Players Limited Atlantic Champion for 1992, and he finishes fifth in this race, but to him goes the additional bonus of $10,000.
Yeah, and doesn't this bode well for Canadian future motor racing that we have David Empringham and Robin Buck, we have Patrick Carpentier. They're all young drivers. They're delightful too. Like, how often do you see a driver like as what David showed in his interview, said, well, yeah, you know, I'm doing this and I've got an unfair advantage? When do you admit you've got an unfair advantage? Come on, David.
He'll certainly learn as he gets through the motorsport that you never admit that you have an unfair advantage.
just a delightful guy. I'm really happy for both of these drivers, both Patrick and David, extremely nice guys.
And of course now the hope is for, I know Empringham, that he can, you know, secure enough sponsorship money to run the entire series next year, American stops included. And that's so very important as you want to develop as a driver. You have to gain experience. You need money, and then you need the experience on the tracks. David Empringham, Stuart Crow, Steve Cameron. Another good run for Cameron. Players Limited Atlantic on TSN. David Empringham congratulating Patrick Carpentier, because on this day at Mosport, both of them are winners. Carpentier winning the Players Limited Atlantic Championship for 1992, but Empringham winning his race at Mosport, his second of the season, as he beats Stuart Crow, who finished second. Interesting, it's a complete reversal of the last race at Mid-Ohio, where Crow was number one, Empringham was two. Steve Cameron does well. Very good run by Harold Heisman out of Oslo, Norway, to finish fourth, and Patrick Carpentier is fifth. Larry?
Tell us, was this a nice cap to this season?
It sure was. It was, other than my own mistakes, it was pretty easy out there. And when I kept getting too comfortable, I started making mistakes, and Russell was right back on me. So I tried to just focus on doing my own driving. But I think I had the unfair advantage this weekend. I know the tracks. I'm with the best team, Kanaska Racing. I had the best engine builder, Jay Ivey, and most of all, the best sponsor, Per Plus. And with their kind of support, it makes you feel good.
Moving their race cars, I don't know where they're taking the race cars, David, but I guess it doesn't make much difference right now, does it?
No, it feels good to have my second win. Boy, I never expected that this season.
And we talked earlier this week about how great of a season has been, and it just keeps getting a little better for you.
Sure is. We're off to Laguna Seca next, and we're on a roll.
By the way, did you happen to see Russell's crash in your mirrors?
No, I didn't. I saw the yellow flags, and I thought, oh no, here we go again. Toronto all over except reverse situation, and I'm certainly not happy to see Russell out, but I was glad to finish.
Incidentally, what David, of course, is referring to, that in Toronto he was trailing Steve Cameron. There was a last lap, one-lap race to the green flag, and you kind of out-snookered him on that one. And we have told, hopefully somebody has told you that Russell is okay. But this certainly is a nice place to win also. It's home.
It sure is. It's the home track. All my friends and family here, and right near the hometown for Per Plus.
And thousands of those people are waiting, as well as the people up in the victory podium. So we'll turn David loose, the winner here at Mosport today.
Hey, terrific finish for him. A great result for David Empringham, because you have to look ahead now. And where do you think this will take him?
Well, I think that every driver here today, whether they win or finish second or third, has to go into the winter season now knowing that they have to go out and sell. With David, this just gives him a bit more clout, so he can go in and say to Pert Plus and the Kanaska team, also with Robin Buck involved with their sponsor. I think that he can turn around and say, this is a success that we've had so far in one short year. We can continue on and we can go on to bigger and better things.
And as we say, he is attempting to sell this program, which has been very successful for Pert and Procter & Gamble. They're trying to sell it in the United States as well, so there may be added financing for him. And Patrick Carpentier, what a season for a young man, a 20-year-old who many never heard of, didn't race at all last year for lack of finances, comes through, wins a race, and wins the Atlantic Championship.
Well, it's great for him, and you're right, I had never heard of him before, and certainly now everybody in Canada and probably more of North America knows who he is. And there again, you talk about finances. Finances are so very important. What I've always said is that what you do on the track is 100%, and what you do off the track is 100%, and that's the sponsor work, the charity work, and making sure that everybody knows who your sponsor is.
Let the celebrations begin here at Mosport. David Empringham is on the podium. You see him there, as well as Stuart Crow, who finishes second, and Steve Cameron. Cameron, interesting story, now out of Sonoma, California, but originally from New Zealand. He was second in Montreal, second in Toronto, fourth in Trois-Rivières, third in Vancouver, and he's third here. He's had a tremendous season, and Cameron in the overall points, Scott, is currently second and tracing Chris Smith.
Certainly had his work to do for him, because you know, coming over to this country, getting to learn all the racetracks, I mean, he doesn't have that hometown advantage that David spoke about earlier. So that's very, very important. And coming to a place like Mosport and being able to tame this track and having another good finish here today, he's got to be satisfied with what he's accomplished here this year.
Chris Smith was a disappointment for, I think, many of the people here, because Smith out of Palo Verde, California, one in Montreal, one in Trois-Rivières, and then breaks, and expected to challenge Empringham, because he really has been one of the cars to beat the entire season.
Very much so, and I expected to see him as a contender today, because we spoke a little bit earlier about the Kanaska team up here testing with David Empringham, Robin Buck, and also Chris Smith. And when you look at it, he didn't seem like he had a real on weekend, and driver hates that. You know, something's maybe not working with the team or the car, and he qualified 6th when we've seen him qualify a little higher, and he was never really a contender before he fell out.
Patrick Carpentier, the champion of 1992, now on the victory stand as he picks up an additional $10,000 for winning the Players Limited Atlantic Championship for 1992. This Players Limited Atlantic race is brought to you in part by Yokohama Performance Radial Tires. Now you've got control. The Players Limited Atlantic Series is over for 1992. And the series champion is Patrick Carpentier, who won his first race in Vancouver and picks up $10,000.
Well, the surprise of 1992 was a surprise again today, but not the way he would like it to be. You were slower than normal.
Yeah, we didn't do enough testing over here with the car on a really fast track. We're getting okay and really good on road course, not on road course, but on street course, and it's tighter, and the car was set up a little bit that way, and we got better during the weekend, but we were still missing just a little bit to get to the front, and I missed my start too. So.
Well, the problem is everybody gets better in a race weekend, so if you start out behind, at least up top, it's hard to catch up.
Yeah, but normally Pierre and Hetnikad are really good, and if we're behind, we catch up right away, and they were really good this weekend. We start from 1:18, 17, 16, 15, and 14, and it was really good. So
tell us the truth now, Patrick. When you're sitting there on the line, obviously you got to be watching the lights, but was it in the back of your mind, gee, if I just cross that line, I'm the champ? Did you think about that?
Oh, yeah. That's what I wanted to do at first. I didn't want to take risk on the 2 warm-up laps, and just wanted to get the championship. And then I wanted to win the race or try to go up front. The win was going to be hard because Dave was really quick.
You know, you were talking about the significance of testing, which equates to seat time, and I think that's the aspect of this season for you that has amazed me the most. You sat out last year, and it's like a football player coming out of retirement for you to race in '92, but you got going reasonably quickly.
Yeah, it's because I had a good coach, Pierre, and Alfredo, and Spenard, who taught me at Spenard the right things to do in the cars and all that. So we got really good. I didn't run last year, but we tested a little bit during the season, so it helped me coming back.
Yeah, I'd say it helped. Not only did he run a little bit last year, but he ran a lot this year. And hey, this guy, I think, is the most impressive series in Canada. He's the champion of it.
You bet. Congratulations to Patrick Carpentier and the entire Ethnicad team as he wins the $10,000 as the 1992 Players Limited Atlantic Series champion, followed by David Empringham, Frank Allers, Robin Buck, and Martin Guimont. It's time now for the Yokohama Now You've Got Control Award, and it goes to the number 11 of Harold Heisman, the 33-year-old rookie from Oslo, Norway, who started in 9th position but moved all the way up to finish 4th. Congratulations to Harold Heisman, who picks up $500. So an Atlantic season comes to an end. Who do you like, Scott Goodyear, of this Atlantic series? Who do you think we might see in the future in IndyCar racing, possibly?
Well, I think everybody here has a real opportunity if they go off and do their homework, and that's off the track. You know, all the sponsorship hunting, the charity work that we spoke about earlier, all that is so very important, because what you do off the track is as important as what you do on the track. And everybody's probably learning that. I know I learned that a lot when I was going through this form of motorsport. So I think we're obviously seeing David Empringham and Patrick and Robert Buck, all these guys right now, I think are guys that we're going to see in the future in IndyCar.
Well, our racing isn't done here on TSN, because coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right after Sports Desk, for the very first time, American Speed Association stock cars will take to the track here at Mosport. And yes, our own Bill Adam will be in the field, and we'll watch for Bill. Kenny Wilden, a champion of Players Limited GM Series. He is on the pole, showing some of these good old boys just how it's done here at Mosport. It's been a tremendous season. Now, on behalf of Bill Adam, Larry Newber, Scott Goodyear, we thank you and we wish you continued success, and our entire crew. I'm Vic Roeder. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye from Mosport and the 1992 Players Limited Atlantic Series.